use FIKOM Radio WhatsApp in our number 089993300101. Okay, I think that's enough of my introduction. Now, let's welcome our speaker, Dr. Justin Lloyd. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. It's very exciting to be here and to see all these different kinds of media. So we've got radio, WhatsApp, YouTube and Zoom all going at once. So particularly for the people that are on Zoom and can see the screen, I am going to share my slides, if that's okay.
Yes.
So share screen. Okay. So how does that look? Can you see the full slide, or do you see the sort?
You can make it in full screen, Doctor.
Full screen?
Mm-hmm.
How's that?
Great.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for inviting me to do the guest lecture. This is such a fantastic topic. So I think we'll have a lot to talk about. As the introduction just said, I will go through the lecture with you, explore this really interesting topic with you, and then we will have some space in the middle to do a bit of a brainstorming session to really think about what this topic means to you and how we can use some of the tools that I'll be sharing with you to understand conflicts, and particularly gender and conflict, how they might learn things about each by thinking about them together. So as you just heard, I am the Acting Director of Gender Studies here at Macquarie University and a Senior Lecturer here in the Department of Sociology. So I'm here in my office, and I just wanted to do something which is really important to do in Australia, which is to acknowledge the country on which we meet. So we're meeting virtually, not physically. You're not here with me right now, but it's really important to acknowledge the country that I work on, which is Indigenous land in Sydney, and we're in the north of Sydney. So this land actually belongs to the Darug Nation. Traditional elders, past, present and future, are very much involved in the university. And this icon I've chosen just for this illustration comes from the Indigenous unit on campus. So this is the totem animal of this community that we, in the land where we live. So we're in a river area. So this is a fish, a black snapper fish. And the fish is really important to the Aboriginal people of this area because this fish lives in the mangroves in a very swampy area and guides the little fish and protects them through the mangroves. So that's kind of a metaphor for the university as a whole, that we're here to guide young people, people who are learning through an environment which, you know, sometimes you need a little bit of help getting through things and passing through the university. So this is really what the Aboriginal people of this community chose to be the totem. So that's the Wadamagal clan of the Darug Nation, and I would like to acknowledge the custodianship that they have given to this land for the past 60,000 years and continuing into the present, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. So the topic was explained to me as being about looking at gender and gender conflicts. So that's a very interesting topic to me in my research. So my research does look at media, as you heard, and particularly at domestic spaces and how we use media in domestic space and how that might change our perceptions of ourselves and other people by using media, which we're doing right now. I'm sure that all of you are joining from very different places and very different environments that you're in. And that's one of the really incredible things of this moment that we're in now. On campus right now, we have students joining remotely all over, partly because of COVID, but also because the technology is quite useful for this. So I'm really happy to share this with you, this lecture. I want to think of it in this terms, this structure. So we'll start with some introductions and an overview. We've just been introduced to the country that Macquarie University is on, and a brief introduction to me. The overview of the lecture is to think through this idea of gender. how has it come about? Why do we need a concept of gender that's different from sex? And why would sociologists say that many conflicts are gendered? What would this actually mean? If we started to use a gender lens to think about conflict, think about where conflict comes from, and how forms of violence, forms of oppression are actually linked to gender conflicts, we might see things that we don't see if we look through other lenses. And I want to think about what a feminist approach to conflict is and what it has to offer. So how feminists have thought about conflict and have a really, really strong tradition to think about conflict, and how taking a feminist approach might get us through some of these conflicts and help us navigate them really clearly. And I want to think a little bit about what solutions work and why. So I'm really looking forward to the question and answer at the end, where you might have questions about this and what we're offering here and how this might all come together. But I will start by thinking about what you would like to get out of it. This is what I thought we would get out of this session today, to understand the difference between sex and gender. What are the differences? What is different if you look through a lens of sex or a lens of gender? Understand what's meant by the social construction of gender. So I'm a sociologist, so I'm very interested in how we as individual people reproduce social structures, how we actually through our everyday actions embody and start to have discussions about gender, which then turn into very real actions. So let's think about what that means, the social construction of gender. I'll explain more what that means in a minute. Then I think about what gender conflicts are and where they come from, why they appear at certain times, why they might not be visible to us sometimes and then other times they are. And I want to think about these feminist approaches, which are to a lot of the energy of feminist approaches is actually to resolving conflict, not to letting it sit and turn into forms of abuse of power or violence, but to actually resolve conflict early on, to try and stop forms of conflict getting out of control. And then I want to think about some examples of conflicts over gender, which we're probably very familiar from mass media, contemporary media, but I want us to pause a bit and reflect on those and think about them using the lenses that I will have explored in the lecture. So this is what we're going to work towards today and where we're going to end up by the end of the lecture. So first of all, I want to start out by thinking about some very primary foundational ideas in gender studies and thinking about what sex is. So if we thought about what sex is, it's very apparent to us. You know, as soon as we're born, we're given certain kinds of clothes. As soon as we learn to talk, we get a pronoun assigned to us that we know she or he. Any animal that we have, we very much know what sex the animal is. We actually categorize the world in this particular way. It's very natural to us. So, pink and blue in Western cultures, wearing a dress in most cultures, wearing trousers in most cultures. These are very common sense kinds of ideas of what sex is. So if we look at that sociologically, so if we actually take sex and start to think about, well, what do we actually mean? Where did that come from? Why is this such an important part of our society? We can see that sex is very much tied to biology. So it's the biological attributes of humans and animals. So it is, if you saw, a book of birds, for example, they would have categorized the male birds and the female birds. It's very much about that sort of birds and the bees kind of approach to society and to who we are. So this is interesting, though. If we start to think about that, what does that mean if we sort of categorizing people and animals along these same lines? Something we can see there is that sex requires a binary. It's one or the other. It's uncontested. It's just natural. It's a medical category. We can't question it. We can't talk about it. It just comes to us and we have to accept it. And something else that sociologists are really interested in is what effect does that have on us? How do we start to think of ourselves in particular ways? And something that the sociologists point out is that this idea of sex positions us as categorizing something and categorizing something as superior or normal. So to be male or female, that's just normal. That doesn't get questioned. And the person doing the categorizing has a huge amount of power because they're sorting people into particular categories. It establishes a relationship of power between the self and the other. So most things get categorized as male. The female is the other. It's the non-normal. It's the extra. It has the different aspects to it. And so, most things are kind of unisex. And in fact, the male category is the one that stays in the unisex category. Everything that's special is the female category. And what this does, sociologists say, is it leaves the dominant group unmarked. So we don't really question maleness. We only question the other parts of identity. We don't look at the dominant group. And this is really, really important as why sociologists, gender studies scholars have moved beyond this idea of sex, because there's so many other things happening in our lives and in society that don't fit into this category of sex. So let's look at what those might be. So we look at gender. It is not about one or the other form of identity. It isn't necessarily linked to biology. It's linked to something much more complex. And this is where we need to think about it a lot more. Think about what gender means. So if sex is linked to biology, then gender is linked to culture. And so rather than one male sex, one female sex, gender scholars argue that there are multiple masculinities and multiple femininities, and that there could even be beyond that, gender's categories that we haven't even yet imagined. Because society changes over time. Biology doesn't really change, but society changes and the social construction changes. So you might want to think about that, what that might mean. It's quite a challenge to us to think that there are these ways in which we are actually changing gender just by doing things in gender, but you might want to think about what that might mean. So particularly, it's pointed out that we go beyond this binary, either or, and it becomes both and. So there could be both having male sex and other kinds of gender. So for example, the acronym, the letters LGBTI plus, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, intersex, and plus means that there's many, many different identities. They're not just one or the other. So what's really important about gender is it does not categorize anyone as normal. There's no person who is the original form of identity and everybody else is deviating from that. It actually celebrates difference. It's not just about tolerating difference or acknowledging and then excluding. It's about celebrating, actually looking at all those differences and all that multiplicity and thinking about how many different genders might not be recognized straight away. People might not feel comfortable. There might be social pressures not to talk about particular gender identities or gender practices. For example, it's only in Australia in the 1980s that actually homosexuality was decriminalized. It actually, took a lot of effort from activists and from people speaking up about forms of discrimination. So up until the 1980s in Australia, you could lose your job if you came out as gay in the public service or in a private company. It was actually only made illegal to discriminate in the 1980s. So that's obviously moving beyond the sex idea where there is one normal identity and everybody else has to conform. This is a very different idea. So it can be very challenging and can be challenging to sort of traditional cultures, but this is the sort of future, I guess, of thinking about life in the world. It's a really important part of our lives. So rather than saying that, there's only one kind of way of being a person, you might see that there are different ideas and feelings towards sex and gender are part of human diversity. So this is as many different kinds of people there are in the world. There could be as many different kinds of gender. And we sort of, that's the plus part of the LGBTI plus. Also acknowledges that people may identify with a gender that's different from their physical sex. So people might be born male or female and decide to change that because of that social construction, because of the way that that gender is actually not something that we're given and we live with all the time, but through wearing, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that, I just want to check the chat. If you perhaps dress a different way, you're already transforming gender ideas. If you live in a culture that tells you that you can only wear a dress if you're a woman and male clothing if you're a man, and you change that dress code, you're actually changing the whole idea of gender. So it's a very empowering kind of idea as well, much more empowering, gives a lot more responsibility to people to acknowledge and accept and celebrate difference of each other, but also gives a lot more, I guess, personal power to be able to change gender and perform gender in different ways. So it then questions this assumption about power. So it's no longer about someone deciding who's right and who's wrong and who's legal and illegal. It's rethinking all of those ideas. And that's why it can also be very challenging for a kind of traditional idea of what gender should be. So we're going to look at that in a minute, but is that all sort of making sense to you? And am I going fast enough, slow enough? Give me a thumbs up if that's good.
Okay. It's great.
Good. Okay, good. Excellent. All right. If I do get too fast or you want me to speed up, just let me know.
Yes, we will, Doctor.
Thank you. So that's where we kind of have to think now about gender roles. So obviously it's not completely open, even though people might change gender performance as they go along. There are still these sort of ideas about gender which we have to live within, and we have to see where they're coming from. So this idea about gender roles I thought was interesting to think about in terms of what we're going to talk about here in terms of conflict. So if there are roles which are set up for us, so we're told even though they're not biological, they're socially constructed, there are roles which many people might subscribe to and not even question, not even think about, not think that they could be different. So this is where we're seeing what are called gender roles. So norms suggesting what behaviours and practices are best suited for a person based on their gender. So these are very much part of historical and cultural context. So over time, these might change. So once, upon a time in Western society, it wasn't acceptable for women to work outside the home if they're married. So I'm married, so therefore, at one point in time, I would not have been able to have this job or even give you this lecture. This is quite a shift in Western society over the last 100 years. And even that example I used before of homosexuality being criminalised, that's very much about, real men have to behave in a certain way. They can't challenge the way that men have always been behaving. They can't not get married because marriage is about having children and so on. So or gay marriage is not about having children. So these are the norms. These are the gender roles that we all have to live within and some extent negotiate. We might try and change them over time, And I think what's really exciting about thinking about it in terms of conflict is that often conflicts might be linked to these gender roles. So people don't want to be in this gender role anymore. It might be limiting to them to do something that they would like to do, like, for example, women to work, or perhaps men would like to stay home and look after the children. And that might also be a gender role that they've been socialized into that they don't really want to be part of anymore. So it's about thinking about those gender roles, and they're kind of like scripts, like we're in a play and we have to play a certain character, and they can be very automatic and people don't reflect on them. So what's important there is that third point then, is that they rely on social institutions to perpetuate them. So you could think of a lot of these social institutions that might be perpetuating gender roles. Some of them might be positive, some of them might be negative gender roles, but where do they come from? And I've just put some examples there. It's not the only ones, but we could think of family. So families might have several generations in them, and some parts of the family might think that one gender role is appropriate for everybody, and then maybe younger parts of the family don't agree with that. So you might have conflict in that perspective. You might have conflicts at school, where certain schools might only teach, for example, cooking to girls, and the male students go and do something else, like technical subjects like construction or engineering or something like that. You could really see that in schools, how they might reproduce these gender roles. I'm sure you can think about politics, where certain even if there are women in a political system, in a parliament or so on, they might not get the roles that might be the economic roles, or they might not get the roles that might be foreign affairs. They might only get sort of domestic, local education, those kinds of roles, which are typically gendered roles. You can think of lots more there, I'm sure. But I just wanted, you don't need to, we won't do this in the breakout rooms yet, but just think about when someone's told you to behave like a girl or a boy. Think about, has that been about a gender role, that you've been breaking the rules, or you haven't necessarily known what to do, and somebody's brought you up on this. This is how we see how those social institutions work. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind, because we are going to go into breakout rooms in a little bit, and I'll give you a chance to share some examples with each other. Okay, so I just want to recap some important concepts here. So these are some concepts which sociologists use, which kind of name some of the things I've already talked about, but give them a little bit of a sort of pin them down a little bit more. So we could talk about something called heteronormativity. So that's the one where I said that in a sort of a binary, and where somebody is doing the categorizing and saying that one person's normal and somebody else is abnormal, this is what we might call heteronormativity. So this is seeing heterosexuality as the only normal sexual orientation. So we could say that a lot of those gender roles that we just talked about might be heteronormative. So if we thought about the family, just even the idea of the family is often heteronormative. Doesn't have to be, but it's often, if you think of family, you think of a mother and a father. Or if you think of sport, you might think of men playing soccer, and in Australia we have a different version of sport for women, like women's soccer, or even before women's soccer, really the most popular sport in Australia for women was netball, which is a version of basketball, but it doesn't really allow you to do the fast moves. Like when you get the ball, you have to stop and stand there and pass it to someone else. So the whole way that these are sort of designed in a way to be very binary, but also it's been very only very recently that, for example, a sports hero in Australia could come out and be and talk about not being heterosexual. That's become such an important part of sport that, you know, men are tough and they're heterosexual. So we can see lots and lots of gender roles that might have this aspect of what we call heteronormativity. So making heterosexuality the norm. Then the second one there is an idea from a sociologist who is called Raewyn Connell, and who started actually this department of sociology that I teach in at Macquarie. So if you're interested, you can, and I'll give you the slides afterwards so you can follow up and read a bit about that. But Raewyn talks about this idea of hegemonic masculinity. So hegemonic is a political term for when something becomes the way that we do it, the way that we think about something, the way that power works in a very concrete kind of way. So we don't even question something, we just do it because we know it's the right way to do it. So hegemonic masculinity is a kind of masculinity that legitimizes men's dominant position in society and justifies the subordination of women as well as marginalized ways of being a man. So Raewyn was really interested in the way that, you know, being a tough sports guy and not talking about being gay, or not even, you know, talking about if your friends were gay or accepting them for their different kind of sexuality, is a form of hegemonic masculinity. So that means the dominant kind of masculinity becomes the one with the most power, the most value, and everything then has to be in relationship to that. So you can think of, you know, being a man, not crying, not showing emotion, maybe even being violent could be a form of hegemonic masculinity, because it would be justifying gendered violence, saying that, you know, it's okay to beat up a woman because that's just how things are. Could be about men earning more money. That's just because they, you know, more status. So Raewyn Connell's really interested in how that subordinates women, but I guess the new idea here is that also marginalize other ways of being a man. So then becoming, you know, not working full time, or not being economically powerful, or not having a family, being the head of the family, is marginalized. So all those other kinds of masculinity, which might not be the tough guy masculinity, they all become marginalized. So this, we can see, is a really important concept and really interesting. It's a little bit different from patriarchy, which was the original idea. Patriarchy being, you know, about the way that society is organized around men getting all the powerful positions. It's even more beyond that. It goes to say that it's legitimating through this idea of masculinity, through what men should look like, what they should do, how they should behave. So I just want to leave you with those to think about a little bit, and then we'll move on and use them hopefully in the next little bit. So here's where I thought we could do the breakout room and think about gender conflict. So here's the question. You can use some of those concepts to think through them and discuss with your colleagues. Think about an instance of a conflict that you've experienced or heard about that involved an aspect of gender. So it'd be fantastic if you could have a chat amongst yourselves and come up with 2 or 3 in your group. 2 or 3, maybe there's a couple that are very similar, and so you could kind of amalgamate those, put those together. But if there's one that seems really different and only 1 or 2 people have experienced or heard about that in your group, I'd really love to hear about those too. That would be really interesting. So how much time do we have for that?
We have 10 minutes, Doctor, for the breakout room discussion. Is it okay, or you need
Perfect.
more?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so student, we're about to make a breakout room for you. Maybe one breakout room contain 10 students. So we can hear about 10 ideas from them, I think. Is that okay for you?
That sounds great.
Okay, So, doctor, you can take a break for 10 minutes. Thank you for the yes. I get my own tea after this. Okay, student, wait for the setting from our host back there. We will disperse you into 10 breakout room randomly, so you won't get to know who you will be at or with other classes or with your own classmate. So the question is, think of an instant of conflict that you have experienced or heard about that involved an aspect of gender. Jadi beliau tanya nih ke teman-teman sekalian, pernah nggak kalian mengalami tentang sebuah konflik yang berkaitan dengan bagaimana gender tertentu itu harus berperilaku. Tadi pengantarnya adalah ketika teman-teman ditanya ini, kamu kalau jadi cowok harus kamu behave dong kayak cowok gitu kan, atau kayak cewek, cowok kok gitu, cewek kok gitu ya. Nah, kira-kira kalian pernah nggak mengalami sebuah kejadian seperti itu yang melibatkan tentang oh kamu tuh cowok nggak boleh gini, cewek nggak boleh gitu, dan kalian merasa di dalam diri kalian really gitu ya, benarkah kita nggak boleh kayak gitu ya. So silakan diskusikan, nanti kalian harus sepakat satu orang yang akan cerita gitu ya, yang akan menyampaikan hasil diskusi kalian. Kalian punya waktu 10 menit untuk diskusi, kemudian nanti setelah 10 menit kita akan kembalikan teman-teman ke main room. So you have 10 minutes for discussions, then you will return to the main room. Yes, Miss Enda, I will put you in the main room with me and Dr. Lloyd. Okay, operator, you can start to open the breakout room. For student join us from YouTube Live, hi. Don't worry, we will put some videos for you to watch. You can take a break. You can go to grab some tea or some snacks, while you also can start to pose your question. If you have any question for Dr. Lloyd, our guest speaker today, feel free to leave your questions on the YouTube chat live, or you can send it via WhatsApp to 089993300101. Okay, operator, you can open the breakout room right now. Student, you can join whatever breakout room you get. Operator, please leave me, Miss Enda Handini, and also Dr. Justin Lloyd in the main room. Okay, student, click to join the breakout room. You have 10 minutes. So we will meet at the main room on 11:10.
Halo UC People, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab milik FIKOM Universitas Ciputra, yaitu LCMC. Nah, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab TV dan MCR. Di lab ini kita diajarkan bagaimana melakukan program siaran untuk ditampilkan di televisi. Bisa dilihat ada yang menjadi kameramen, floor director, dan presenter. Lalu di lab ini juga dilengkapi green screen untuk visual effect.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita sudah ada di ruangan MCR atau Master Control Room, di mana ruangan ini mengatur segala yang akan muncul di TV.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita lagi ada di lab audiovisual editing LCMC. Nah, kita di sini belajar untuk mengedit audio dan video juga. Kita langsung membawa semua file mentahannya ke dalam lab editing dan diedit menggunakan software Adobe Premiere ataupun After Effects. Untuk video dan audionya menggunakan Adobe Audition.
Halo UC People, saat ini aku lagi di ruangan Public Relation Laboratorium LCMC. Nah, ruangan ini biasanya digunakan untuk belajar komunikasi strategis. Yang lain adalah pelajaran public speaking ataupun public relation. Nah, tempat ini biasanya juga dapat digunakan sebagai pertemuan konferensi pers.
Hai UC People, saat ini kami sedang berada di ruang radio laboratorium LCMC. Nah, di sini kita belajar apa aja sih, Fer?
Jadi kita di sini tuh belajar mengoperasikan radio itu gimana caranya.
Oh gitu, bikin program siaran juga kan ya?
Bikin program siaran, habis itu
Benar
kita
banget.
bikin skrip juga.
Sampai yang terakhir bikin jingle, Fer.
Bikin jingle.
Benar banget. Nah,
Terus?
kawan-kawan jangan lupa kita akan sering live di Instagramnya UC FIKOM sama streaming.
Ya, jadi stay tune guys, dan jangan lupa follow UC_FIKOM.
Bye-bye!
Welcome to UC FIKOM!
Halo UC People, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab milik FIKOM Universitas Ciputra, yaitu LCMC. Nah, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab TV dan MCR. Di lab ini kita diajarkan bagaimana melakukan program siaran untuk ditampilkan di televisi. Bisa dilihat ada yang menjadi kameramen, floor director, dan presenter. Lalu di lab ini juga dilengkapi green screen untuk visual effect.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita sudah ada di ruangan MCR atau Master Control Room, di mana ruangan ini mengatur segala yang akan muncul di TV.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita lagi ada di lab audiovisual editing LCMC. Nah, kita di sini belajar untuk mengedit audio dan video juga. Kita langsung membawa semua file mentahannya ke dalam lab editing dan diedit menggunakan software Adobe Premiere ataupun After Effects. Untuk video dan audionya menggunakan Adobe Audition.
Halo UC People, saat ini aku lagi di ruangan Public Relation Laboratorium LCMC. Nah, ruangan ini biasanya digunakan untuk belajar komunikasi strategis. Yang lain adalah pelajaran public speaking ataupun public relation. Nah, tempat ini biasanya juga dapat digunakan sebagai pertemuan konferensi pers.
Hai UC People, saat ini kami sedang berada di ruang radio laboratorium LCMC. Nah, di sini kita belajar apa aja sih, Fer?
Jadi kita di sini tuh belajar mengoperasikan radio itu gimana caranya.
Oh gitu, bikin program siaran juga kan ya?
Bikin program siaran, habis itu
Benar
kita
banget.
bikin skrip juga.
Sampai yang terakhir bikin jingle, Fer.
Bikin jingle.
Benar banget. Nah,
Terus?
kawan-kawan jangan lupa kita akan sering live di Instagramnya UC FIKOM sama streaming.
Ya, jadi stay tune guys, dan jangan lupa follow UC_FIKOM.
Bye-bye!
Welcome to UC FIKOM!
Halo UC People, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab milik FIKOM Universitas Ciputra, yaitu LCMC. Nah, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab TV dan MCR. Di lab ini kita diajarkan bagaimana melakukan program siaran untuk ditampilkan di televisi. Bisa dilihat ada yang menjadi kameramen, floor director, dan presenter. Lalu di lab ini juga dilengkapi green screen untuk visual effect.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita sudah ada di ruangan MCR atau Master Control Room, di mana ruangan ini mengatur segala yang akan muncul di TV.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita lagi ada di lab audiovisual editing LCMC. Nah, kita di sini belajar untuk mengedit audio dan video juga. Kita langsung membawa semua file mentahannya ke dalam lab editing dan diedit menggunakan software Adobe Premiere ataupun After Effects. Untuk video dan audionya menggunakan Adobe Audition.
Halo UC People, saat ini aku lagi di ruangan Public Relation Laboratorium LCMC. Nah, ruangan ini biasanya digunakan untuk belajar komunikasi strategis. Yang lain adalah pelajaran public speaking ataupun public relation. Nah, tempat ini biasanya juga dapat digunakan sebagai pertemuan konferensi pers.
Hai UC People, saat ini kami sedang berada di ruang radio laboratorium LCMC. Nah, di sini kita belajar apa aja sih, Fer?
Jadi kita di sini tuh belajar mengoperasikan radio itu gimana caranya.
Oh gitu, bikin program siaran juga kan ya?
Bikin program siaran, habis itu
Benar
kita
banget.
bikin skrip juga.
Sampai yang terakhir bikin jingle, Fer.
Bikin jingle.
Benar banget. Nah,
Terus?
kawan-kawan jangan lupa kita akan sering live di Instagramnya UC FIKOM sama streaming.
Ya, jadi stay tune guys, dan jangan lupa follow UC_FIKOM.
Bye-bye!
Welcome to UC FIKOM!
Halo UC People, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab milik FIKOM Universitas Ciputra, yaitu LCMC. Nah, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab TV dan MCR. Di lab ini kita diajarkan bagaimana melakukan program siaran untuk ditampilkan di televisi. Bisa dilihat ada yang menjadi kameramen, floor director, dan presenter. Lalu di lab ini juga dilengkapi green screen untuk visual effect.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita sudah ada di ruangan MCR atau Master Control Room, di mana ruangan ini mengatur segala yang akan muncul di TV.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita lagi ada di lab audiovisual editing LCMC. Nah, kita di sini belajar untuk mengedit audio dan video juga. Kita langsung membawa semua file mentahannya ke dalam lab editing dan diedit menggunakan software Adobe Premiere ataupun After Effects. Untuk video dan audionya menggunakan Adobe Audition.
Halo UC People, saat ini aku lagi di ruangan Public Relation Laboratorium LCMC. Nah, ruangan ini biasanya digunakan untuk belajar komunikasi strategis. Yang lain adalah pelajaran public speaking ataupun public relation. Nah, tempat ini biasanya juga dapat digunakan sebagai pertemuan konferensi pers.
Hai UC People, saat ini kami sedang berada di ruang radio laboratorium LCMC. Nah, di sini kita belajar apa aja sih, Fer?
Jadi kita di sini tuh belajar mengoperasikan radio itu gimana caranya.
Oh gitu, bikin program siaran juga kan ya?
Bikin program siaran, habis itu kita bikin skrip juga.
Sampai yang terakhir bikin jingle, Fer.
Bikin jingle.
Benar banget. Nah, kawan-kawan jangan lupa kita akan sering live di Instagramnya UC FIKOM sama streaming.
Ya, jadi stay tune guys, dan jangan lupa follow UC_FIKOM.
Bye-bye!
Welcome to UC FIKOM!
Halo UC People, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab milik FIKOM Universitas Ciputra, yaitu LCMC. Nah, sekarang saya sedang berada di lab TV dan MCR. Di lab ini kita diajarkan bagaimana melakukan program siaran untuk ditampilkan di televisi. Bisa dilihat ada yang menjadi kameramen, floor director, dan presenter. Lalu di lab ini juga dilengkapi green screen untuk visual effect.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita sudah ada di ruangan MCR atau Master Control Room, di mana ruangan ini mengatur segala yang akan muncul di TV.
Hai UC People, sekarang kita lagi ada di lab audiovisual editing LCMC. Nah, kita di sini belajar untuk mengedit audio dan video juga. Kita langsung membawa semua file mentahannya ke dalam lab editing dan diedit menggunakan software Adobe Premiere ataupun After Effects. Untuk video dan audionya menggunakan Adobe Audition.
Halo UC People, saat ini aku lagi di ruangan Public Relation Laboratorium LCMC. Nah, ruangan ini biasanya digunakan untuk belajar komunikasi strategis. Yang lain adalah pelajaran public speaking ataupun public relation.
Okay, welcome back, Dr. Justin Lloyd. So we are about to start our next sessions by letting the students to head back to the main room, and we will hear about their results of the discussions. Okay. Hi, student. Welcome back to the main room. I hope everyone is here. Okay, still 40. Okay, still the number is still going up. So for the student, hi. For the student join us via YouTube Live, thank you for your patience. I hope this video really help you to more understand our laboratory here, and we will see you soon here. We miss you so much. We've because of the pandemic, we haven't met in like almost 9 months. We will miss you so much. I hope what happened in the Macquarie University Dr. Lloyd, can you tell us about the pandemic going on there and how you guys held the class during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah. So in March, the campus closed and the state and the city went into lockdown. So you're only allowed to leave the house really if you were going shopping or needed to visit someone who wasn't well. That included the universities, and schools closed as well for about 6 weeks in Sydney. Still going on in different states, but so during the time, that 6 weeks, we only had classes online. So mostly the lectures were recorded and students listened to lectures, and then we had interactive sessions like this one. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about teaching. Yeah.
Yes, well, I never know about Zoom before, but now I have to use it for the class. Yeah, we have to learn. Even though we are lecturer, we keep learning for something new every day. Okay, student, welcome back to the main room. I think everyone is here right now. Okay, let's hear from breakout room number 1. Breakout room number 1. Please send your representative to state your answer for the question. Hi, breakout room number 1.
Halo.
Hi, Leonard.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please state your answer from your room, from your discussion.
Boleh pakai bahasa Indo nggak?
Okay, nggak apa-apa. He will tell in Indonesian, but yeah, I will translate it for you. Okay, silakan, Leonard.
Oke, jadi hasil diskusi dari breakout 1 itu kayak kita semua masing-masing memiliki pengalaman tentang kesetaraan gender. Ya. Nah, pengalamannya itu tentang mulai dari pengalaman hidup, kayak misalnya si Sasha kan dia kan mau jemput temennya yang cowok kan bawa mobil. Terus temen yang cowok kayak udah sini biar aku yang setirin gitu. Terus tapi si Sasha kan nolak. Nah, jadi kayak men always do works, apa kayak pria selalu mengerjakan segalanya gitu loh.
Okay, including behind the wheels, yeah, including driving the car. Yeah. Okay, so from the breakout number 1, they said that when a girl pick up a boy by using car, the boy always offer to drive. He won't let the girl to drive. So that's kind of the gender conflict about who should drive. Ya, gitu ya Leonard ya?
Iya, betul.
Oke, udah gitu aja? That's it?
Ada tambahan mungkin, Sasha?
Ada one?
Maybe
Sasa?
mungkin bahasa Inggris tapi agak
Inggris apa-apa ya.
Okay. So it's about the driving, like who will drive. So they boys have like the tendency to like, okay, the driver must be like the boy one because like yeah, it's okay if it's like an act of gentleman, but I already offer if I'm okay with driving, but they tends to like have the pride that guy must have like the masculinity to drive, like something like that. And then my friends, because we most of us in the breakout room are girls, so we discuss about how we daughters that have like image of a mother, so we have like the pressure to have skills like cooking, cleaning, something like that. So especially me, but because I have like in my family, my dad especially doesn't teach me how to do like girl stuff, quote unquote. So when other people know that I can cook, I can clean well, or maybe just like they usually tends to like, oh my god, why you can do that, like you will be a wife, something like that. But I personally doesn't believe in that. So yeah, something like I have like the patriarchy in Indonesia, it's very kind of
Annoying.
mengganggu,
Annoying.
disturbing. Yeah, it's kind of
Uh-huh.
annoying.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. Thank you, breakout room number 1. For the next breakout room number 2, hello, who's the representative? Please do in English, yeah. It doesn't matter. My English is bad, but I'm being very bold to be the moderator of this guest lecture. So please, guys, you are the younger one. Don't afraid to show me your English skill. Okay, breakout room number 2. Who will be the
They've all been great so far, so thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yep.
Thank you. Breakout room number 2. Hi.
Maybe Noval will be representative.
Noval. Okay. Hi, Noval.
Sorry, I don't know the breakout room number.
Okay, yeah, nggak apa-apa. Okay, Noval, state your answer.
Okay, during our discussion last time, so we conclude that most of our society depending men should be masculine enough. And for example, like if men using skincare or something like that, this society will judge us as a man, like why you do that. And society, and usually our society demanding like men should be in army, men should play football, men should driving or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Aku mau nambahin.
Okay, Kiki, yes.
I mean, like, skincare is made for everyone. There's no only for women label yet. Someone still get the tendency to categorize something by gender.
Okay, so the example is for having skincare, yeah? So men using skincare are being judged by the society of not being a manly enough, gitu ya. Okay, thank you, breakout room number 2. Next, breakout room number 3. Who's the representative?
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Who is this?
I think I will be the representative.
Hi, Adela. Yes, please answer.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to represent the breakout room. And I'm sorry if my English is not perfect. From what we discussed, me and my colleagues think that our hobbies and our activities affect our behavior. Like, if you hang around boys, you will act like one. You know, and one of our colleagues is a softball player, and because of softball is such a manly activities, like almost all of the members are boys. Well, baseball and softball, but you get what I mean, right? And that way, what makes her so tomboy and so different from other girls, and that's what makes her get the get the expressions of others, like you have to act like a girl.
Just because she hang out with boys in the softball team.
Yep. And the conclusion is, we think that our hobbies or our activities
doesn't represent your gender identity,
affect our behavior.
Okay.
If any other of my colleagues want to say something.
Okay, breakout room 3. Any add for Adela's statement? Okay, thank you, Adela. Okay, I get what you mean. Yeah,
it's not perfect.
It's okay. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Breakout room number 4. Breakout number 4. Who's the representative?
Me.
Hi. Are you? Yes. Take your answer, please.
In break room number 4, we shared a lot of story and kind of forget to conclude for the answer actually. But basically, we more discussed about how men judge by their sensitivity. For example, when they cry, or by women, they judge by their activity, by their tomboyish activity.
Okay, so
there is two different perspective from our discussion. That from the girl story, we she just accepted and change their behavior, and from the boy story, they just ignore it and do whatever they wanted to do.
Okay, so girls tend to be more sensitive when they are being told to behave as a girl, but boys tend to just let it be. Yeah, just ignore it. Okay, thank you, Ayu. Breakout number 5. Breakout number 5. Breakout. Hi. Hi, Debbie. Yes, please state your answer.
Okay, so from my group, actually each of us has experienced this gender conflict. Like one of my colleagues experienced this in her household. Like, so in her house, the woman should do the chores. Like you should run the house, like do the cooks, do the cleans. Like actually, men can cook too, right? But they think that it's not their responsibility to run the house. And from my experience personally is I used to be not so girly. I'm not comfortable enough to use a skirt, but my mom ever told me that I need to show my feminine side more by wearing a skirt. You know, I used to not understand it, but I just follow her like, okay, because I'm a girl, I need to wear a skirt. So yeah, that's from my group. That's all.
Thank you, Debbie. So because you are a girl, your mom always told you to wear a skirt and also to make you do the house chores. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you good at house chores?
Yeah.
I think you're good at cooking.
Yeah, I love cooking. Yeah, just because my mom always told me like, girls should do the house, should run the house. You have to be able to cook. You have to be able to clean. Because later in when I have my own home with my husband, I have to be able to do all of that because that's my responsibility as a wife.
Wife and also a girl, a woman. Yeah, a woman should do the chores. That's what they think. Okay, thank you, Debbie from 5. Next, breakout room 6. Sorry, breakout room 6. Yes.
It's me.
Oh, hi, Feli. Hi. Yes, please state your answer.
Okay. So in room number 6, we discussed everything basically from our own experiences. And let me just start with my own experience that I've had before, like a few years ago. I mean, so I had an ex. So and we basically were in a traffic light, and we stopped there, and then there's another driver asked us. Actually, he asked me, and then at that time he asked about where to go, and then I answered some things, and my ex at that time saying that, oh, you should, he caught me, and then he kept talking about the direction to the place that he want to, and then after that I was going to say another thing, but he just like, okay, you need to shut up and just let me do the talk. And then after that we went to another place, and then we were just going to have a just casual eat, and then he mentioned it again that you should not do that, like just because you're a woman, and just let me do the talking. You just need to shut up for most of the time and stuff like that. So it's basically quite not logical in my perspective for having that gender conflict. And that's my that's my experience. And from other of my my friends also state that, like for example, Komang, he state that he want to be a father that do the house chores instead of rather just do the work, like what basically socially society wants the men to work instead. But he wanted to be to just teach his future kids to like doing football and do the house core stuff, and he wanted his wife to just do the job like 9 to 5 job or something like that, like searching for money. That's Komang. And then the other example is that like Henry, he also got this gender conflict in his house, in his family, which Henry often to get like saying that, maybe for example his father saying that, oh, you need to just go outside and drive the car and do stuff and get money, stuff like that. And for him it's quite irritating, because why always guy who need to do the heavy job, in his opinion. And then the other thing also, an example from our junior, I forgot her name though, but if you're in the chat, just let me know. She shows herself in the chat, and she have really short hair, and she's quite like boyish. So she said that boyish.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, Esther.
Yeah, it's me.
yeah, that's you. Okay, so she basically said that she's the society wants her to just do feminine stuff, but she doesn't want it. So this is also gender conflict, and unfortunately our discussion didn't conclude anything, just only by say examples instead. So if I may conclude our discussion, is that I think it's because of or we think that it's one of the part of east side or eastern culture, whether people want us to do our job basically on our gender. So it also sometimes makes the gender conflict for a lot of us. But I'm not talking about liberal or conservative, but it's just, it makes conflict based on the culture itself.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Feli. Perfect. So clear. We'll hear loud and clear. Thank you very much. For next breakout room 7. 7, yeah. Yeah, 7. Breakout room 7. Hi, Marisa.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Justin, and hi, Miss Amanda.
Hi.
So we have conclusion about attitudes and behavior in our society. In some cases, neither woman nor man can express themselves. I mean, that's our problem in society. They were like, it's not polite me to judge some women because they don't act like a normal woman. Like for example, when we as a woman sit on the chair not properly, and our society just like no, it's not polite, mate. It's not about polite and impolite, but they only want women act like a normal person, like a normal woman. In some cases, I found that a guy, they can't even express themselves because they have to choose between act like a man, the real man, a masculine, or act like a guy, just like them. That's happened in our society. I mean, between attitude and manner. Yeah.
Okay. Are you done, Marisa? Okay.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, Marisa. I think you have a technical difficulty about your internet, but it's okay. We hear you loud and clear. Yeah, it is a society that decide what we have to do, yeah, based on our gender. Thank you. Next, for 7, breakout room number 8. 8.
Okay.
Okay. 1 minute, please. Thank you. That's your answer.
So in breakout number 8, we talked a lot about how society judges us too fast. As in, like, once I had this experience where I was playing skateboard with my friends, and suddenly this girl came up to me and said, "Why are you playing skateboard? Isn't it just for boys? And aren't you scared to be judged and get catcalled?" And I was like, since when did skateboard was invented for boys only? And why should I care what other thinks about me? And then they said that, well, because we are girls, we need to be more classy and feminine. Aren't you scared to get catcalls? And in that moment, I just walk away because I realized that nowadays girls care more about what others think of them because of society that expect a woman to be perfect. And because honestly, when we get catcalled, we as a woman can't do anything besides to just act like we didn't hurt them. So yeah.
Yeah, catcalling is still happening. Yeah, a lot of time.
Yeah, a lot of time.
Most of them. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you so much. Okay, next, breakout room number 9. Please state your answer. 1 minute. Safira.
Hi, my name is Safira, and we discussed that a lot of us experience being in a position where we are told not to behave certain way because we are male or females. Such as that the other breakout rooms have mentioned, girls need to have longer hair and not short hair, and different opinions where women need to be at home, do the housework, such as doing laundries and such. But I think one of us mentioned that they think that it's because of different generation. Our parents are the ones that teach us that we should be certain ways, whereby now that we are more exposed to different perspectives of the world, we're more open toward accepting gender equality roles where women can do whatever they want and men can do whatever they want too. Like men can use skincare and whatsoever. But I personally experienced where my mom asked her granddaughter to not like Spider-Man because she's a girl, and that she needs to not play outdoors too much. Her skin needs to be whiter, brighter because she's a girl. She cannot do lots of outdoor activities because she'll be tan and such. Yeah.
That's it, Safira?
Yeah, and we all agree in my team, we all agree that the next generation can accept gender equality, and with that we can be open towards it, where male and female can do the work they want and whatever hobby they pick.
Great. Thank you, Safira. So I love Spider-Man. Tell your mom that a lot of girl loves Spider-Man. Don't worry. The last breakout room number 10. Please state your answer.
Hi, thank you for the time.
Sinka, hi.
Our team just discussed about, is it weird that we see lots of girls consuming cigarettes and wearing tattoos, just it's stereotypes just for manly men, not for a girl. Like the other group mentioned that we should they should behave politely and not wearing some things like that. But hey, this is the world that we need to open our mind, and that women and men can do both same thing. So yeah, we still spot a lot of people disagree about women consuming cigarette and wearing tattoos.
Okay. Thank you, Sinka. That's it?
Yep.
Great job. Thank you all. Thank you, student, for 10 breakout rooms. Dr. Lloyd, the floor is for you.
Thank you very much, everybody. There were such interesting examples and discussions, and really interesting to hear the concerns that you guys have and the way you experience these as conflicts. So as something that happens where you go, this isn't right. I need to make some changes here. Something needs to be changed. I think that's really, really important, not to accept injustices when you see them, and if something doesn't feel right, to think about it and think about what you can do about it. So they're all really interesting, and I think they all have very strong aspects of what we've been talking about, which is that somebody gets to decide what's normal and then everybody else gets judged according to that. So those gender roles are still really used by those institutions, so that we, school, family, friendship groups, for example. That was something I didn't mention before, but also relationships. So the way that, a couple of you mentioned, boyfriends and, parents' relationships maybe as being something where this gender conflict emerges. That's so interesting. And so for what I wanted to do next was then think about these rules, where they come from. All of you mentioned examples where there was something that was ascribed to one gender, and by doing it or not doing it, you were breaking the rules. And so I want to think about that and where these things have come from. So the next part of the lecture will sort of work through those topics that you've all raised, and we won't have time to go into individual examples, but I'm going to pull out some themes and think about them. I took some notes, and we'll go back to those notes as we go along. So the next point I just wanted to make was to think about conflict and gender from this proposition. So we've been talking about the structures, the way that gender roles link into really powerful institutions in society, the way we take things for granted, that maybe we don't question it. Just by being here today and starting to talk about these things, you're starting to question them. But not everybody does that, or not everybody wants to do that. They can be refusing to do that for particular reasons. So here I want to think about this proposition, and this is very much a kind of sociological way of thinking about conflict. So it doesn't come so much from bad people who've got the wrong idea. There may be bad people out there, but most people are trying to be good. Most people are trying to do the right thing, what they think is the right thing. So if we thought about all those conflicts that you've talked about, the person that's saying to you, don't use skincare products if you're a guy, or that you shouldn't be on a skateboard if you're a girl, or you shouldn't smoke cigarettes if you're a girl, they're doing it kind of because they think that's their job. And sociologists want to work beyond that and think, well, where does that come from? Why do people think it is that job, their job? So the proposition here is that conflict emerges from unequal structures, not bad people. So you can be angry with someone, that's okay, but then start to reflect on that and think, what's the structure underlying this? So, for example, I think a few of you talked about this, which is real or perceived incompatible goals. So how do people have these ideas about what the purpose of something that you're doing is? Why these goal that you might have, like to, play sport, you might be doing it for fun, but somebody else thinks that you're doing it to break the gender norms. And these relate to power relationships. So somebody feels that they can tell you not to do something or to do something. And that's because they feel they've got that power from that structure, from, as we talked about, from the binary, from that this is right, this is wrong, rather than accepting differences and saying, well, there's many different ways of being a girl, there's many different ways of being a boy. And in fact, maybe just being a person is more important than being girl or boy. These things start to emerge. We can also talk about the unequal distribution of resources. So something that gender studies scholars are really interested in is how privilege, the right to be able to do something like to work, like not to have to worry about cooking or cleaning. These are privileges, and there's a lot of unpaid work that goes on in the household, that without that unpaid work, nobody would really be able to get out the door to go to work in the morning. Nobody would be able to sort of have a decent standard of living. The cooking, the cleaning, these are all forms of unpaid work that some people get the benefit from and some people have to spend a lot of time doing. So it's not to say you can't enjoy it. You might enjoy cooking, you might enjoy having a clean house, but who cares about it enough to actually do that? And I think that's a really interesting question. Is time is a resource? How does time relate to the kind of earning that you can have? If you have to look after children, you're not going to be earning as much in the workplace. So these are unequal distributions. So it's not necessarily a bad person that says this. It's somebody who accepts or doesn't think about this inequality. And then there's also the different experiences that are not really recognized or acknowledged in dominant structures. So quite a few of you talked about, you know, the way that generations might experience things slightly differently. So maybe you could think about how different generations might have experienced something from their perspective, but then also the other side of that is they should be thinking about your perspective. So what is different in each generation? You might think about those structures that might have come about. Why are they there? Why do people believe in this unequal distribution? What is important to them about it? Because that might be where you can start having a conversation, start changing things. But also, most importantly, sociologists are really interested in the institutions that perpetuate inequalities. So particularly where there's a religious basis, maybe, to some of these forms of inequality or discrimination, like where, for example, you know, it might be written in the Bible that women have to look after children and men are the head of the household. You know, it's written into part of the Bible. It's even was written into the marriage vows until quite recently in Christian weddings, that the woman was the property of the man and that she had to obey him. This was actually love, honor, and obey was for women. So this was actually written down somewhere in the religion, that this was part of how families worked or how relationships worked. So all of you, I think, have started to pull apart those assumptions and started to think about them. And when we start to think about conflict, then we can think about changing the structures. We maybe can't change individual people except, you know, over a longer period of time. But if we change institutions, then we're changing things much more quickly. We start to actually do them. So changing the marriage vows, changing the law about marriage, for example. We've just recently in Australia had a vote on marriage equality, and no longer are same-sex relationships unrecognised. Because before, if you were in a same-sex relationship, you couldn't inherit property if your partner passed away. You couldn't make decisions about children, all of these things. We had to change the institutions. And then a lot of those things have just sort of become normalised because the institutions tell us what's normal. So it's a bit of a back and forth there. So we start to think about this gendered conflict. We get to a lot more, I think, productive idea of what conflict is about. Conflict is not always negative. It can be really good to have a chat to your boyfriend, maybe the person who said it was their ex, maybe it was the thing that you broke up about, but maybe if it comes up in your family with somebody that you can't, you know, divorce them, if they're part of your family, maybe you can start to talk about some of those different experiences and think about conflict as a positive thing. It can actually have ways of changing institutions, and particularly when we look at how big social groups like, you know, gay and lesbian people, when they protest, or women when they vote, they might be using non-violent forms of conflict, changing institutions in really, really powerful ways. But I also believe very strongly myself that every single conversation you have, every single thing you do every single day makes change to these issues. So conflict is part of life, maybe, and we can sort of use it in a positive way. So I want to think a little bit then about what feminism has to say about conflict. So this is continuing that idea about thinking as conflict as something that's going to happen. When you're brave, when you're courageous and you challenge inequality, this is going to happen. So we might want to think about feminism as letting us understand how dominant groups oppress other groups and exploit others, as well as allowing for a liberation from dominance. So feminists might see men as oppressed just as much as women in a lot of those situations where they feel like they have to be controlled, they always have to drive. That might, you know, the driving might be just a little symptom of other ways in which men think they always have to be dominant. And particularly feminists, the main issue in conflict, which probably affects it's estimated in Australia, maybe 1 in 3 women and girls is gendered violence. And some of you have also mentioned things like street harassment. Sexual harassment can also be a symptom of this kind of conflict. So where feminists are trying to say that men are just as oppressed by this. They're actually diminished by performing this kind of violence, and they need to understand and be able to deal with their feelings, deal with conflict in a healthy way, rather than use violence as a solution to any form of conflict. So, you know, even military, for example, is very much, you guys mentioned that men, you know, have to be part of the military. This is a form of violence that's very much linked to gender. So feminism wants to change the structures and change the basis of this inequality rather than just the individual people involved. This is where they're going to put most of their effort because it's quite important to feminists not to try and sort of deal with the people who've already got their mindset, but deal with the people who are coming, the new generation. And a few of you mentioned that, and I think that's really, really important to think about the children who are growing up now. What kind of society are they going to inherit? What about your little sisters and brothers? What do they see happening around them? And what would their hopes for the future be? So the last point there too also is really interesting, that feminism is starting to, particularly in the US around African American feminism, is to think about how you could use this idea about conflict, not just to think about gender, but you might think about race and ethnicity. So in the US, the Black Lives Matter movement has a lot to say about how it's particularly Black men who have been assaulted by police. There's particular ways in which Black women are invisible in feminist movements. You can think of lots of examples there. And this idea is also linked to class. So certain ways of doing things might be permissible for gender in certain classes, but not in other class backgrounds. So lower socioeconomic groups might actually have less restrictions on gender because there's less idea about, you know, you guys also mentioned, you know, what would people think of you? How do other people think of you? Would they be, you be diminished by breaking the gender rules? So this idea is called intersectionality, where there's this intersection between gender, race, class, disability. It's a very interesting concept, and I think we can, you might want to think about that a little bit more, maybe in other lectures or topics in your course. So I wanted to think about some solutions to gender conflict, and your lecturers asked me particularly to think about mass media and contemporary media. So I've just got a couple of examples that I think might be interesting for us to work through. I'll just go through them quite quickly so we have time for discussion. The first one is about this example of Wonder Woman, who became the United Nations mascot a few years ago. So Wonder Woman was appointed as the UN ambassador for women and girls, and this provoked an incredible conflict within the UN, where women who worked for the UN were very unimpressed by this, very angry about it, and took action. So there was a protest on the floor of the United Nations, where these women actually refused to participate in a meeting and stood there. They held signs in the front lobby of the United Nations in New York saying that real women deserve a real ambassador. So they were very angry that the leadership of the UN, who were mostly men, had chosen this, what they thought was very stereotypical. You look at Wonder Woman, kind of very beautiful, wearing sexy clothing, very individual, not really talking about these structures. They were very angry about that, and they made this protest. So they had a successful petition. They brought this conflict into the open, brought it out onto the floor of the United Nations. And this petition talked about not having a fictional character, like a cartoon character, as the ambassador for women and girls at the UN, but actually a real person. And this was successful. After 2 months, the United Nations stood back and they appointed a real person as a who was going to do real things in the real world as the women, Wonder Woman, instead of Wonder Woman, as the ambassador for women and girls. There was also a social media campaign, got a lot of press coverage because it's quite a important institution, but people felt that it was very symbolic as well. Two examples I want to talk about in Australia. So there's a really interesting critique of how sexual violence is reported in mainstream media in Australia. And this journalist called Jane Gilmore, you can look at her site, it's hashtag I fixed it. She actually has a blog where she goes to mainstream media reports and she changes the headlines. So she changed this headline because it used the words bikini barista. So it was about a girl who happened to leave work and put on a bikini before she left work. So she finished work, she put on a bikini, she was going to the beach and someone broke in and raped her. So she wasn't wearing the bikini at work, but the bikini somehow got into the headline. And this journalist rewrites the headline. So where she's crossed it out, bikini barista, she says, man attempts to rape a woman at knife point, caught on CCTV. And that's her comment down the bottom in italics. What she was wearing has no place in this report. So then she writes a commentary about the story. So it's a really important tabling of commentary on violence, on gendered violence, and I think a really interesting way of highlighting how that works in very common sense ways. Sometimes we don't think about the headline, we just read the article and it passes us by, but she's making us pay attention to that. And the other one in Australia is a really important group called Destroy the Joint. They got their name from a very sexist radio commentator who said when we had a female prime minister about 2015, he said, oh no, it's terrible. We've got a female prime minister. She's going to destroy the joint, meaning destroy Australia and our parliament. And they used that name and then they've started a sort of documenting all these different sexist media commentators. And they also have started this count of women who've been killed in intimate partner violence because no government, no police were collecting these statistics. And they've actually forced the government to now collect the statistics and to have an investigation into each of those women, and overall many, many more programs for domestic violence have come about because of these activists. They've done many, many other things, but I won't go into all the other things that they've done in mass media. I just wanted to leave you with a couple of those examples of really interesting ways of pulling out gender conflict and making it visible, and then using mass media to discuss it. So here's quickly what we've done. We've discussed the difference between sex and gender. We've explored what's meant by the social construction of gender. So that's not something natural, it's something that we all participate in and institutions support. We've thought about gender conflicts, we've thought about feminist approaches, and we just think very briefly a couple of examples about gender in contemporary media. Thank you so much for all your attention. We have just a few minutes, I think, for questions.
Yes, thank you so much for your lecture. Well, everyone, you can give Dr. Lloyd the reaction of clapping hands. I think, wow, thank you. Okay, we still have like 10 minutes left for the question. I will read you. Actually, there are a lot of questions. I love this because students are so into our topics today. I'll read from the Zoom chat room from Kiki, Rizky. Why most of Western culture could easily accept the idea of the gender conflict and diversity, such as feminism, than Asian culture that it seems very conservative?
Wow, great question. I would be speculating about the answer to that. But I would say that power in the society is perhaps very centralized. And you may be looking at other, like I was talking about with intersectionality, maybe other forms of inequality are also perhaps more normalized, such as economic inequality, racial inequality, perhaps. I'm just wondering about that. But also, I think there are models for feminist critiques in Asian societies. I remember a very long time ago doing anthropology and learning about Indonesian women, that actually Indonesian women are very strong and have a lot of power in the house, particularly about economic power. And so I think what I remember from this reading was that actually a lot of the resistance and a lot of the oppression comes because the women are actually very strong and the men are sort of having a bit of a back. You think that sounds right? Is that interesting?
Yes, of course. Someone voices came in. I don't know who. Okay. Okay. Yes. Great. Thank you. Another one from Esther, Jen Esther. What can we do to stop the reproduction of harmful gender norms, not just individually but also institutionally, like rape culture that make. Okay, it's very hard. I think she wants to ask about whether or not the rape culture is being blamed by the victim, but not the person who did that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So the rape culture and particularly that sort of violence, I think it can be normalized and not in many cultures. I think it is normalized, and popular culture normalizes it.
Yes.
Media normalize it. Even, you might not think of it as a violent act, but somebody might say something that's very violent, and it starts on that level, and then I think it builds up into actual practices that people might carry out. So I think you've got to come at from both sides. You have to come at from the bottom, the grassroots side, and actually have ways of people thinking about violence differently and thinking about rape and sexual violence in a different way. And then also the institutions need to really prosecute and make sure that there's no inequality in the way that people are prosecuted and people are held to account for doing that. Yeah.
Okay, so the normalization in the media, in the culture, that makes it even more happening and make people just, oh, it's normal, it's okay, yeah. So the next question will do the really summarize everything. This is for Christine Angelica. She asks, what do we need to do as Generation Z to lessen conflicts that arise from different perspectives of gender?
About some of the conflicts we've talked about today.
Yes. The Generation Z do what should they do as a younger generation to lessen the gender conflict?
Yeah, so I think keep doing what you're doing. All the things that you've mentioned, where you've said, you haven't accepted something. You've said it's not okay to be judged or to judge other people, where you've gone ahead and kept going with something, but also where you've tried to look for that deeper structure and think about where the pressure points are. Where can you make the best? You don't need to be angry at everybody all the time, but when you need to get angry, who should you be angry at, and how do you let them know that you're angry and that that's their job to fix it? So keep talking about it, keep talking to your politicians, keep researching it, like find out the statistics on violence, on inequality, on pay, how many hours people do unpaid in the home, all of those things, and have the evidence. So when you have those conversations, you're really ready to let people know.
Yes. So do your research and then be politically active, to speak your mind, to support the ideas that really represent your own ideas. Doctor, thank you very much for today. Thank you for your time. I hope we can meet you in another topics and another time.
I hope so too.
Yes.
Indeed.
Thank you. Have a nice day, and please be healthy wherever you are.
You too. Stay safe.
Stay
And
safe.
terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Yes, thank you. Teman-teman, terima kasih. Thank you for your participation in today's class. I'll remind you that you still have a quiz. You can access it on eLearn. You can access our quiz until 1 p.m. I repeat, you can answer my quiz until 1 p.m. to get the second green zone, green line for our absent today's. Thank you for the student who joined via UC FIKOM Radio and also our YouTube channel. Thank you. I hope we can see you soon in another guest lecture. And please be safe wherever you are. Be healthy. Stay healthy. And I'm sorry if I have a lot of difficulty in speaking English. I hope you understand. I'll meet you soon. I'll meet you in other guest lecture. Bye.
안녕하세요.
Halo, saya Profesor Dr. Burhan Bungin, Dekan Fakultas Ilmu Komunikasi dan Bisnis Media. Selamat datang di FIKOM Universitas